"Turn your wheel, turn it!" I yelled it so hard my throat burned, but Karen didn't even twitch. Her SUV launched across my field like she'd been greenlit for a sprint she didn't train for. Tires weren't rolling, they were excavating. Fresh soil, fresh rows, hours of work shredded under all-wheel drive audacity. I stepped straight into her path, waving like a man trying to flag down a runaway quarterly report. She slammed the brakes, dust exploding around her like a failed product demo. The door popped open. She stepped out wearing that corporate presentation smile, tight, confident, aggressively unaware of her surroundings. "Oh," she chirped. "Didn't know this route was operational." Operational. She turned my land into a logistics lane. My eyes dropped to the trenches she carved, deep, raw, brutal gouges cutting through the rows I'd just finished prepping. I swear my jaw clenched so hard it nearly filed its own performance review. And while I stared at the damage, she adjusted her sunglasses with the confidence of someone who had never, in the entirety of her HOA career, been told no. "I'll adjust," she said, nodding like we were aligning KPIs. "Just leveraging the most efficient corridor, efficient, leverage on my property." I told her flat out this wasn't a corridor, shortcut, pathway, or strategic alignment opportunity. It was private land. She blinked once. No apology, no awareness, no shame. Then she smiled again, tighter this time. "Okay," she said. "Noted." And right after saying noted, she got back into her SUV and drove off the same way, grinding the damaged soil even deeper. Dust rose behind her like a signature. She didn't make a mistake. She made a declaration. And I had no idea this was her warm-up lap. "Excuse me, did you just raise your voice at me?" That was the first thing Karen said as she marched up to the edge of my field, her clipboard tucked under her arm, as if it held shareholder secrets. She stood stiff, chin high, that signature HOA posture. Half authority, half delusion. Her blonde bob didn't move in the breeze, her blazer looked ironed by lasers, and she had the confidence of someone who had never lost an argument because she talked through everyone else. That was Karen, 40-something, HOA president. A woman powered entirely by iced coffee and entitlement. I hadn't even finished my coffee when she cleared her throat, loud, sharp, like she was sending a meeting reminder straight into my eardrum. Before I could respond, she extended her hand like a CEO introducing herself at a conference. "I'm Skylar Campbell," she said, "president of the Lakewood Residential Improvement Association. Most residents call me the HOA lead." Then her eyes flicked down at me like she was assessing whether I fit her professional standards. I didn't, and I didn't care. She waited for me to introduce myself, so I did. "Mark Rivers," I said, "owner of this farm, every inch of it. I'm a simple guy, early 40s, ex-military. I run the farm my dad left me. I like quiet mornings, clean rows, and people who respect boundaries." Karen was none of those things. "Well," she continued, "your soil borders our community. Technically, you're part of our extended impact zone." Extended impact zone, corporate nonsense wrapped in HOA packaging. "We should align expectations," she added. "Maybe form an access partnership." I stared at her. "Karen, this isn't a partnership, it's my land." Her smile faltered, then tightened. "In that case," she said softly, "I hope we don't have to escalate." There it was, the threat. And I was about to find out just how far she'd escalate. The next time Karen crossed my land, she didn't even pretend to hide it. I heard the engine before I saw the car, this low, smug hum rolling across the field like it owned the place. I stepped out of the barn just in time to see her SUV powering straight through the same path she'd shredded the day before, tires dropping into yesterday's ruts like they were pre-installed lanes. She wasn't sneaking. She was doubling down. When she finally stopped, she leaned out her window with the same corporate smile energy people use before saying something ridiculous in a meeting. "Oh, hey, Mark. Just doing a quick pass-through. Time-sensitive errand." Errand across my property. I walked up to her window. "We talked about this, Karen." She nodded lightly like she was listening to a podcast instead of me. Right, but it was just for today. I'm in a throughput crunch. You know how it is." Throughput crunch on my damn farm. Before I could respond, she added, "This route creates workflow efficiency for the neighborhood. I'm just trying to reduce friction." I pointed at the splintered rows beneath her wheels. "This is friction." She blinked like she hadn't considered that destroying someone else's land might count as a problem. Then, without warning, she shifted gears, backed up a few feet, and swung the wheel to turn around. The tires gouged deeper into the dirt, cracking one of the new irrigation lines I'd laid. She didn't notice, or she didn't care. Probably the second. As she drove off, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, 2 other SUVs creeping near the property line. Watching, taking notes. Karen wasn't acting alone anymore. And the next time they came, they weren't just passing through. They came with a plan. I was fixing the irrigation line when Karen's tires snapped. I heard footsteps, 2 sets, crisp and synchronized like a pair of auditors marching into a budget meeting. I looked up, and there they were. 2 HOA board members. Clipboards out, sunglasses on, matching khakis, matching attitudes. You'd think they were inspecting a construction site, not trespassing onto my farm. The taller one stepped forward. "Good morning," he said with a rehearsed smile. "We're here to conduct a compliance review." I wiped mud off my hands. "Compliance for what?" He flipped a page on his clipboard like he'd been waiting for that question. "We've received reports," he said, pausing for dramatic effect, "that your land is part of a community access adjacency zone." Adjacency, zone, they were making up words now. The second guy chimed in. "To maintain uniform access standards, we need to inspect your soil conditions and traffic flow potential." Traffic flow potential. On my private farm. I stared at them, stunned, not because they were wrong, but because they were so confidently wrong. "Who gave you permission to walk onto my land?" I asked. They exchanged a glance. The tall one cleared his throat. "As HOA representatives, we operate with implied jurisdiction over shared impact environments." Implied jurisdiction. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I said, "This isn't shared anything. This is private property." The shorter one scribbled something on his clipboard, dramatically, like he was documenting a crime. "So uncooperative," he muttered. I took a step toward them, pointing at the ruts behind me. "Your president caused this. Your HOA doesn't have authority here. You're trespassing." They both froze. Then, without another word, they turned and walked off the property, whispering furiously to each other as their whole plan had glitched. But I caught the last sentence. Karen isn't going to like this. And she didn't, because the next move she made was straight up insane. It rained that night, the slow, heavy kind that sinks deep into fresh soil and turns every footprint into a crater. By morning, the ground was soft, slick, fragile. The kind of morning where any sane person would avoid driving across a field. So, of course, Karen chose that day. I heard the engine before sunrise, a loud hum, a confident rev, then the unmistakable crunch of wet soil collapsing under the weight it wasn't built to carry. I stepped outside just in time to see her SUV sliding sideways across my field like she was hydroplaning through a swamp. Mud sprayed behind her like fireworks. The tires dug trenches so deep they could have doubled as irrigation canals. And what was Karen doing? Waving, actually waving, like this was some kind of friendly morning commute. I walked straight toward her, boots sinking into the mess she'd made. She leaned out her window and said with a breezy tone, "Hey, Mark, rain's wild today, huh? Just doing a quick workflow pass." Workflow pass. My jaw nearly locked. "Karen," I said, "you're tearing up my field." She looked down at the destruction beneath her tires like she was noticing it for the first time. "Oh, yeah, soil's a little soft. Maybe you should consider stabilization upgrades." Stabilization upgrades on the rows she just destroyed. I held up my phone and showed her the footage, her tracks, her turns, her damage. Her smile froze, only for a second. Then the confidence slid right back into place. "Well," she said, "if you just let the community use this pathway officially, we wouldn't have these operational hiccups." Operational hiccups. Like she was talking about a glitchy app, not my actual livelihood. Before I could argue, she backed up, hard, digging her tires even deeper into the mud until a long, wet crack split the ground. My irrigation pipe. Snapped clean in half. She didn't apologize, she didn't even react. She just said, "We'll sync on this later," and drove off. And that was the moment I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. Karen wasn't confused, she was escalating. And what she did next proved she wasn't just entitled, she was strategic. I thought the broken irrigation line would finally make Karen slow down. I was wrong. The very next afternoon, I walked out to check the field and saw her parked right at the property line, Engine off, window down, posture stiff like she was performing surveillance for a government agency she made up herself. She held a clipboard, because of course she did. As soon as she saw me, she snapped a picture. Then another. Then one more, like she was gathering evidence for a trial only she believed was happening. "What are you doing?" I asked. She didn't look up from her clipboard. "Documenting," she said. "For the compliance cycle." Compliance cycle on my private land. I took a step closer. "You don't have authority here." She finally met my eyes, her expression calm, almost smug. "Authority's about influence, Mark, and the HOA has plenty." I felt something tighten in my chest. This wasn't miscommunication. This was a power play. She pointed her pen toward the field. "Your refusal to cooperate creates operational bottlenecks. It's impacting community flow." I nearly laughed. "Community flow? Your car damaged my farm," she shrugged. "Temporary disruption. But the bigger issue is your resistance." Then she lowered her voice like she was delivering a confidential memo. "We can make this official. Convert your access lane into a designated shared-use path. Everyone wins." Everyone except me. I stepped forward, standing close enough to make sure she heard every word. "There is no shared-use path. There is no access lane. This is my land, that's all." She didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't back off. Instead, she smiled. A slow, satisfied smile that told me she wasn't done. "Well," she said softly, "you can reject collaboration, but you can't stop community engagement." Then she put the SUV in drive and rolled away, leaving a fresh set of tire prints right at the edge as if marking territory. And somehow that wasn't even the worst part. Because later that evening, 3 neighbors knocked on my door. And the message they delivered told me Karen wasn't just escalating, she was recruiting. When I opened the door, 3 neighbors stood on my porch, people I'd waved to for years, folks I'd helped with fences, tractor issues, even the occasional lost dog. But that evening they didn't look friendly. They looked coached. One of them, Mr. Dawson, held a folded paper as it might explode. "Mark," he said, not meeting my eyes, "we need to talk about the access situation." The access situation. Karen's words were spreading like a memo. I stepped outside and crossed my arms. "Let me guess, Karen sent you." They exchanged glances. That was enough. The woman in the middle cleared her throat. She explained everything. "The HOA wants to establish a small right-of-way across your lower field. She said you've been uncooperative." Uncooperative. That word again. I couldn't help it. I laughed. "Did she also mention she's the one tearing up my property?" More glances, more hesitation. Finally, Mr. Dawson sighed. "She said that's because you won't assign a designated lane. She said if we formalize it, the damage will stop." I stared at them, stunned at the level of delusion Karen had managed to manufacture. "She literally drove through mud so deep she broke my irrigation pipe," I said. "A designated lane wouldn't fix her behavior. She'd just use it as leverage for more." Silence. Then the third neighbor, a guy Karen had clearly worked hard on, looked up and said, "Look, Mark, she told us if we don't resolve this, she'll push for fines. And you know how she is." Ah, fear, that's how she was doing it. "She has no authority here," I said. "This is a farm, not HOA land." But they still looked uncertain, as if Karen had injected just enough corporate jargon to confuse them. Before any of us could say another word, a car horn blared behind us. Karen's SUV. She pulled up with a full audience of HOA members behind her, clipboards out, phones ready, like they were about to film a documentary titled "How to Lose Friends and Violate Property Lines." She stepped out and announced loudly, "Everyone, let's begin the vote." Vote for my land, that was it. The last straw snapped clean, and what I did next ended every negotiation attempt permanently. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't waste one more breath trying to reason with a woman who believed my land was a community asset she could beta test. Instead, I turned around, walked straight past the cluster of HOA clipboards and headed for my barn. They followed me with their eyes, confused, whispering, trying to decode my silence like it was an encrypted email. I climbed onto my tractor, started the engine, let the roar drown out every one of their ridiculous vote discussions. Karen's voice shot over the noise. "Mark, this is a cooperative decision. We need alignment before you." I lowered the bucket, revved forward, and dropped it deep into the wet soil along the exact path she loved driving through. The earth gave way instantly, soft, soaked, perfect, dirt piled up in heavy mounds. A clean, deep trench was carved across the entire route. Not dangerous, not harmful, just impassable. Karen's voice cracked mid-sentence. What are you doing?" I didn't look at her, didn't need to. My focus stayed on the trench, straight, deliberate, undeniable. A boundary you could see from space. The HOA crowd panicked. "You can't just excavate an access lane. That's an obstruction. This violates shared utility expectations." Shared utility expectations. They were just inventing words now. I lifted the bucket again, dropped another load of dirt, and continued digging, slow, steady, rhythmic. Every pass made the trench deeper. Every scoop made their faces more frantic. Karen finally stormed forward, shoes sinking into the mud. "You're being hostile, Mark." I shut off the tractor. The field went silent. Then I turned to her and said the calmest words I'd spoken in weeks. "No, Karen, I'm setting a boundary, something you've never respected." Her jaw locked. Her eyes burned, and for the first time she had no comeback. The trench stretched the entire length of her shortcut, a long, muddy reminder that her reign of community access was over, or so I thought. Because that night, something happened that proved Karen wasn't backing down. She was regrouping. I barely slept that night. Not because I was worried, because I knew people like Karen don't quit. They regroup, they re-strategize, they come back with initiatives. And sure enough, just after sunrise, I saw the evidence, footprints. 3 sets, walking right up to the edge of the trench like they were inspecting a construction project. Someone had even placed an orange HOA traffic cone beside it, as if marking off a hazard the community should be aware of. They'd turned my boundary into a stage prop. I checked my cameras. The footage told the whole story. Around midnight, Karen returned with 2 board members, flashlights, clipboards, a tape measure. They didn't speak much. Just pointed, measured, whispered, and scribbled notes like consultants preparing for a hostile takeover. At one point, Karen crouched at the trench, touching the mud with the back of her hand like she was checking soil temperature for a vineyard she thought she owned. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "Okay, it's deep, but drivable if she hits it with momentum." Momentum. She was planning another crossing. I stepped outside, walked to the barn, and checked the weather. Rain, more rain, perfect. The trench wouldn't just hold, it would liquefy. It would become a mud sink with no traction and no mercy. If she tried to cross, her SUV would bury itself. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't booby-trap. I didn't alter the land. All I did was create a boundary and let nature do its thing. By mid-afternoon, the trench had turned into a soft, muddy canyon. One good push of gas and a heavy car would dive nose first into it. So I set up the cameras facing the path. 3 angles, crystal clear. Then I waited. And as the sky darkened, I heard it, the familiar rumble of an engine revving with confidence it didn't deserve. Karen was back. And this time, she wasn't slowing down. Her headlights cut across the field like she was entering a stadium, not trespassing onto private land for the 15th time. The engine revved louder, too loud, too confident. She wasn't creeping up to the trench. She was aiming for it. I stepped to the edge of the barn, hidden in the shadows. I wanted a front row seat. Not out of revenge, out of pure disbelief that someone could double down this hard on being wrong. Her SUV rolled forward, then paused. I could see her silhouette inside, shoulders squared, hands gripping the wheel like she was about to win a prize for most persistent delusion of the year. Then she backed up. Hard, mud splashed behind her. She was giving herself a runway. I whispered to myself, "There's no way she's actually doing this." But Karen was a woman who believed boundaries were optional and consequences were negotiable. She hit the gas. The SUV launched forward, tires spinning, mud spraying into the air like a firework of bad decisions. She barreled toward the trench with full momentum, full confidence, full denial of reality. The front wheels reached the edge. Suspension dropped, and then whump. The SUV belly flopped into the mud with a sound I'll never forget, a wet, hollow thud that echoed across the field like the earth itself was tired of her attitude. Mud exploded over the hood. The tires spun, but nothing moved. Her headlights pointed helplessly into the sky, as if begging the universe for a do-over. Through the windshield, I saw Karen's face shift from triumph to confusion to horror. She slammed the gas again, engine roaring, wheels screaming, but the SUV only sank deeper. The mud swallowed it inch by inch as nature had finally said, "I'll take it from here." She threw the door open, stepping out into knee-deep sludge. "Mark," she shrieked. "What did you do?" I walked toward her slowly, calm as ever. "Nothing," I said. "You did this." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She had no script for this moment. And when the rest of the HOA arrived minutes later, the real chaos began. I was still standing there, arms crossed, mud on my boots, patience long gone, when a parade of headlights crept down the road. One by one, HOA board members pulled up like they were arriving for a quarterly crisis meeting. Clipboards came out, phones came out, gasps came out. Karen pointed at me with a trembling, mud-covered hand. "He sabotaged me," she screamed, slipping backward as she tried to climb out of the trench. "He created a hostile environment." Hostile environment. Right. Her car was halfway to the Earth's core because she refused to turn left like a normal person. The HOA crew rushed toward her, tiptoeing around the mud like they feared it had legal consequences. The tall board member spoke first, voice shaky. "Karen, this is significant operational damage." Karen snapped. "Write it down. He engineered this. He created a hazard zone." I held up my phone and tapped the screen. 3 video feeds popped up, crystal clear, her late-night inspection. She measures the trench, her analyzing it like a lab sample. She said the exact words, "It's deep, but drivable if I hit it with momentum." Every HOA member froze. A few jaws dropped. One guy muttered, "Oh, she really said that?" Another quietly turned off his phone recording like he didn't want evidence of being on her team. Karen's face drained of color, mud smearing down her cheek. "That's taken out of context." I didn't say a thing. I didn't need to. Then, like a scene from a sitcom written by Karma, the sheriff's cruiser rolled up the driveway. Someone must have called him, maybe a neighbor, maybe the universe. He stepped out, glanced at the trench, glanced at her SUV, then looked at me. "Mark, did you dig this?" "Yup." "On your property?" "Yup." He turned to Karen. "So why were you driving through it?" She sputtered. "Because he blocked community access." The sheriff blinked once. "Ma'am, this is private land." Silence. The HOA members wilted, Karen deflated, the mud around her shifted. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I saw doubt crack through her armor. But the fallout that came after this, the backlash from her own board, hit her harder than the trench ever did. The morning after the trench fiasco, the HOA held an emergency meeting. Not at the lake, not at the clubhouse, on Karen's driveway. I watched from a distance as board members huddled around her like they were reviewing a failed quarterly report. No clipboards this time. No sunglasses, no confidence, just disappointment. Within 10 minutes, voices rose. Within 15, hands pointed. By 20, Karen's voice cracked loud enough for me to hear from my porch. I was trying to improve community flow, but nobody was buying the corporate spin anymore. By the half-hour mark, it was official. They voted her out, removed as HOA president, stripped of her authority, her throne of clipboards gone. A week later, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. That was it. The empire she built out of rules, threats, and fake jurisdiction collapsed faster than her SUV sank in the mud. And as I walked the field that evening, cleaning up, fixing what she'd damaged, I thought about boundaries, not just fences, not just property lines, the kind we draw in life. The kind people try to push, test, and trample because they assume we won't push back. But here's the truth. You teach people how to treat you the moment you decide what you will and will not allow. Stand firm long enough, and even the loudest Karen eventually falls silent. My field is quiet again. My rows are clean, my mornings are peaceful, and no one drives across my land without permission, not because of fear, because of clarity. When you draw a boundary with confidence, the world learns to respect it. Because sometimes the trench you dig isn't to trap someone, it's to remind yourself you're worth protecting. If this story hit home or reminded you of your own Karen moment, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop your story in the comments. I might feature it in a future episode.